I've just come back from seeing Robocop, and I'd like to talk about it a little bit in relation to some of the ideas that interest me. What is story and what's a good story? So, Robocop is your kind of typical action movie in terms of its genre, in terms of the kind of people it's marketed at. Um, and I guess as a subgenre of the action movie, it would fit mainly into the science fiction genre, and perhaps a little bit into your superhero genre and all the kind of conventions that you'd expect from that. Now, generally, although I do like a rip roaring kind of action movie, I tend to get really annoyed at them. I get annoyed at them because the underlying values really fit into something that I think is damaging. So your typical action movie is going to say something like, good and evil are clearly defined. Good looks like me, evil looks like you. And whatever the kind of discourse or subject of what's happening, in the end, resolution is through violence. It'll also probably reinforce some other kind of values. It will say that there is good and evil, purely. So good people are basically intrinsically good, and that's why they do good things, and they're moral. Bad people are intrinsically bad, and they do bad and evil things, like wanting to take over the world, or blowing up tubes, or buses or planes, because they are bad, because they are evil. Usually, if a bad person kills a good person, it's kind of proof of their evilness. And if a good person kills a bad person, it's kind of okay, because that's one less bad person in the world. And the effect of that, I think, is quite pervasive, because we're told that story a lot. It means things like, I don't know, Tony Blair can stand up and say we're fighting evil in Iraq, and we don't laugh our socks off, because we kind of buy into the notion that evil things are done by evil people primarily because they're evil, or why we put up with prisons despite the fact that it doesn't seem to reduce crime or the fear of crime, and it takes a lot of money, because we kind of believe that all these bad crimes are done by bad people for no other reason than them being bad, I guess. And if we lock them away because we're too civilized to throw away the key, would kind of solve the problem. And I think movies that kind of reinforce that, stories that reinforce that we tell each other or we read in the papers, about monsters and devils, I think they're harmful. However, I'm a bit of a sucker for a good action movie. I love the excitement, the exhilaration, and some action movies I really love. And I'm also a bit of a sucker for your science fiction movie. I think science fiction is a wonderful opportunity, actually. And I really rate this film. I rate Robocop, and I would like to tell you both the positives and the negatives, but on this occasion I'm going to start with the positives here. So the reason I like Robocop is, on its deepest level, it does what science fiction should do. Science fiction is a brilliant genre, a brilliant form to explore what's going on in the present. It enables a writer to take something that's going on now and take it to its natural conclusion. So 1984, for instance, George Orwell saw the mechanisms of the kind of totalitarian interpretation of communism and took it to its natural conclusion, and created 1984. And by taking it to its natural conclusion, despite all the propaganda saying it's okay, it's not harmful, he got readers to think about, if we follow this path, where does it go? Again, other classics like, Brave New World. Huxley wrote that when all of these discussions about kind of eugenics and genes and creating perfect societies was all around, we're going to create utopia, and he said, okay then, let's take the premise that the basis of society is everyone's happy. And he took that to its natural conclusion so that we could look at what we're talking about. And one of the things Robocop does really well is, at the moment, there's a lot of things being talked about in benign ways. So there is a massive shift of power between, I guess, if you like, nation states with very flawed, but at least a principle of democratic accountability as to powerful corporations. So, for instance, if you add all the money up in the United Nations, it comes to less than 10% of all the wealth and money owned by private corporations, just to give you an idea of balance. And this whole idea that, who runs a service, who owns a service, like whether it's council houses or Meals on Wheels or, the doctors and hospitals, is neutral. It doesn't matter who owns it. And this massive shift, I guess, to private companies running things directly is something explored in this film. So in this film, there is a big, powerful company that really now runs the military. And the way it runs the military is that it provides robot soldiers to keep the peace in Arabic states. And in almost direct parallel scenes to what we see on the news, we kind of see these powerful robots patrolling the streets of, a village in somewhere like Iraq or Syria. And the CNN type guy is showing what a good thing this is. They're keeping the peace, and everyone has to kind of stand with their hands up, and it really shows you actually what a terrifying notion that is by supposedly showing it being sold to us. So in one sweep, one of the things this film does is bring to our attention the consequences of a very current discussion, which is the idea that we should stop sending human soldiers to war, and we should use drones and robot armies. I mean, the America is investing billions into robot soldiers and robot armies and drones and kind of remote control technology, and it highlights that in a very entertaining but way that you can't really ignore. And I think that's a very important thing to take to the agenda, take to its natural conclusion, and show to us so that we can think about it. Another thing it does is show that same company being barred out of the domestic American market because the US population will not accept police officers not being human. And so the film really starts with this big corporation having a problem. It wants to it could make billions of pounds if it could crack that market that is still state-run and still human-run. And it wants to change it, and nobody will accept robot soldiers. And so the kind of premise, if you like, is that Robocop is created to be a human robot. And this is going to be a big marketing campaign to make him a hero. And then, just by looking at this human robot, it does a couple of things. So again, we've just had Google buying this smart thermostat company that manages to print these very, very cheap sensors. And these sensors at the moment can monitor movement and temperature, and very shortly they're going to have very cheap cameras on them, and they're going to be in your kettles and on your phone and in the Forest of Dean, monitoring the impact on wildlife, and they're going to be fucking everywhere in everything, so it can talk to each other and the monitorize. We know, for instance, another thing Google's doing is investing in this thought cloud, so it's putting a lot of money in to these technologies that now can already read people's thoughts from the electromagnetic stuff. This technology is current. The amount of vocabulary these machines can pick up from your thinking is limited, but it's going to advance very, very rapidly. We're living in an environment where neuroscience and the understanding of consciousness and being able to implement and influence people's consciousness without them being aware of it, in terms of small operations that can change people's personalities, and not without them really being aware of that. We live in where there are massive breakthroughs now in cyborgation. The ability to literally link machines to be directed by thoughts and consciousness and heartbeat. So we live on the cusp of all this technology, and this theme explores it. So it explores the impact on his family and him. Is he human? Is he not? It impacts how he's too emotional, and that really affects his ability to do what the company want him to do as a military machine, as a effective police machine. And so they literally are able to get rid of his emotions, and so he stops being human. And ideas that it's a machine that thinks it's a human, not a human that is a machine. And it takes these ideas and takes them to their natural conclusion alongside many, many other in a rip-roaring, fantastic action movie. I mean, fantastic. The fight scenes are brilliant, the guns are brilliant, the technology is brilliant. I mean, everything is fucking fantastic in terms of action scenes, and in fact better than most. So I don't know about you, but one of the things that really puts me off an action movie is when the credibility gap's too big, right? So, for instance, every time a hero kind of has like 20 people around them and they're just constantly missing him, and then he fires 2 shots and gets them, it kind of breaks the illusion for me. And here, the firefights are really realistic. They show how hard it is actually to hit anybody with a gun, and that applies equally to the so-called goodies and the so-called baddies. Again, a lot of these films say, oh, I don't need to think about story, we need special effects, and then they don't even pull the special effects off very well. The special effects in this movie are fucking fantastic, and unlike in many movies, they serve the purpose of the story. So, this film the story couldn't have been told so well without these good special effects. I mean, I fucking love it, right? Yeah, and I loved it. The story wasn't too cheesy. It was fucking fantastic. Fucking fantastic. It's going to be a series. And so, for me, this was first in its type. And I'd rate it alongside other fantastic sci-fi movies and superhero movies that I rate. I guess the Manchurian Candidate would be the most similar to this. And this is a Manchurian Candidate of our time, discussing the issues of our time. My other favourite, sort of a slightly different genre, the superhero genre, are films like X-Men. Now, to be specific, the first 2. Because, again, X-Men are wonderful fucking action movies. But they don't just explore an important theme. And as I said, superhero and sci-fi can let us take it. So the mutants could be anybody. They could be gays, they could be Jews, they could be blacks. It's about fear. But they also do something this film doesn't. So in films like X-Men, there are no goodies and baddies really. And what I mean by that is that you have the bad mutants take to arms because of oppression, by if you like, the majority. And so you have mutants that say, no, we have to find a peaceful way of interacting and getting them to accept us. And then mutants that are so bitter at being excluded, they take to arms. But you can understand their motivations. If you like, the majority, again, are not portrayed as evil bastard majority of savages. They're portrayed as people who are genuinely frightened of difference. And they do all of that within a beautiful fucking superhero, superpower action movie with good special effects, right? I like Spider-Man in terms of the last reboot of Spider-Man, the first 2. Because again, I can't think of any better exploration of being a teenager than those 2 Spider-Man movies. And again, even the baddies are just scientists, if you like, driven for understandable reasons where their technology takes them over, rather than being intrinsically evil. Or they're motivated for some justifiable reason. And those are some of my favourites. Anyway, those are my thoughts about Robocop. Its one weakness is that it does play into the goodies and baddies, very simply. So in this story, Murphy and his family are the goodies, and the powerful corporation are the baddies, along with some corrupt cops, and this guy particularly who owns it on the media. So it's a goodies and baddies film, but within that I think it explores some things that really need to be brought to our attention, and it's just a really fun, entertaining ride. If you need a bit of escapism that doesn't, I don't know, say some bad things or unhelpful things in my view. Go out, check it out, and let me know what you think.